Afghanistan is reeling from a catastrophe that has shocked even a nation hardened by decades of tragedy.
And a powerful 6.2 magnitude earthquake and multiple aftershocks have hit southeastern Afghanistan as the death toll from Sunday's devastating quake climbs past 2,200. According to a Taliban government toll, the vast majority of those killed in the magnitude 6 earthquake that jolted the mountainous region bordering Pakistan late Sunday were in Kunar province, where 2,205 people died, 3,640 were injured. Another 12 people were killed, hundreds injured in the neighboring provinces of Nangarhar and Laghman. The toll had been expected to rise as volunteers and rescuers were still pulling bodies from the rubble. Limited access to the hardest hit areas of the mountainous Kunar province have delayed rescue and relief efforts, with rockfalls from repeated aftershocks obstructing already precarious roads.
A devastating 6.0 magnitude earthquake has torn through the eastern provinces, leaving entire communities in ruins and families shattered beyond repair. The death toll has climbed past 2,200 people, with nearly 4,000 injured and countless more missing beneath the rubble of collapsed homes. Villages that stood for generations have been erased from the map in mere seconds. This isn't just another natural disaster, this is a humanitarian crisis, unfolding in one of the world's most vulnerable regions, where every resource was already stretched to the breaking point. To understand the full scope of this disaster, we need to look at where it struck and why this particular region was so catastrophically vulnerable. The earthquake hit just before midnight on Sunday, September 1st, 2025, with its epicenter located about 17 miles northeast of Jalalabad, near Afghanistan's border with Pakistan. But here's what made this quake so deadly. It struck at a shallow depth of just 8 kilometers beneath the surface. Shallow earthquakes are far more destructive because the seismic waves don't have to travel as far to reach the surface, meaning they retain much more of their devastating energy. The modified Mercalli intensity reached 9. That's classified as violent shaking that can cause severe structural damage to well-built buildings and destroy poorly constructed ones entirely. And unfortunately, most buildings in rural Afghanistan fall into that second category. The traditional mud brick homes that have sheltered families for generations simply couldn't withstand the Earth's violent convulsions. The earthquake primarily devastated Kunar province, where almost all of the casualties occurred. 5 districts were particularly hard hit, with villages like Wadir, Shomash, Masud, and Arit being completely destroyed. In Nurgal district alone, hundreds of casualties were feared, while Chake district reported an additional 200 deaths and 500 injuries. The scale of destruction is staggering. Over 8,000 houses have been destroyed across the affected region, with up to 65% of all buildings in Kunar province either collapsed or severely damaged. That means 98% of structures in the province sustained some form of damage. Think about that for a moment. An entire province where virtually every building has been affected by this disaster. But the destruction wasn't limited to Kunar. Nangarhar province, home to the regional capital Jalalabad, saw 12 people killed and 255 injured in the Darai Nur district alone. Laghman province reported 80 injuries, with 58 of those occurring in Alangar district. Even distant provinces like Nuristan and Panjshir suffered casualties and structural damage. The tremors were felt across the region, sending people fleeing from their homes in terror as far away as Kabul and even into neighboring Pakistan. The human stories emerging from this disaster paint a picture of unimaginable loss and suffering.
We have no kitchen to cook meals and prepare tea or do anything for ourselves. It's the 3rd day. Our children are spending day and night in a makeshift shelter, and we have not received any first aid.
2 of my nieces, an 11-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy, were trapped under the rubble and unfortunately passed away. It was a bad incident.
There's fear because of the earthquake. There are many aftershocks. The mother of the child sitting beside me has also got injured. Her leg is broken. She's in the house and we cannot go inside the house. We are spending day and night in the field. We have left our rooms.
Families are living under makeshift tarps with no food or shelter. Children who survived are spending nights in the open, exposed to the elements. Medical aid hasn't reached many communities even days after the earthquake struck. Parents describe the horror of hearing their children's cries from beneath the rubble, unable to reach them in time. These aren't just statistics. These are real people whose entire worlds have collapsed along with their homes. One man searches through the rubble of what was once his home, having lost his wife, son, and daughter in a matter of seconds.
Mir Khan sifts through what's left of the family home. His village was flattened when a magnitude 6 earthquake struck the southeastern Afghan province of Kunar.
In this earthquake, my wife, my son, and my daughter, all three were killed.
The scale of devastation is clearer from the air. Thousands of homes destroyed, constructed mostly of mud bricks and wood, unable to withstand the shock.
The aerial footage from the disaster zone reveals the true scale of devastation. Thousands of mud brick homes reduced to dust and debris, entire villages that look as if they've been bombed rather than struck by a natural disaster. These traditional homes, built by hand over generations, simply couldn't withstand the earthquake's violent force. Another survivor, speaking from Nangarhar Hospital, described how he managed to rescue 3 of his children before the roof collapsed on him. "I was half buried and unable to get out," he told reporters. "My wife and 2 sons are dead, and my father is injured and in hospital with me. We were trapped for 3 to 4 hours until people from other areas arrived and pulled me out. It felt like the whole mountain was shaking." His account captures the terror and chaos that thousands of families experienced in those horrifying moments. But here's what makes this disaster even more tragic. Afghanistan was already in crisis before the earthquake hit. The country has been struggling with economic collapse, drought, malnutrition, and the forced return of over 1.2 million Afghan refugees from Iran and Pakistan this year alone. Many of the affected residents were among these recently deported migrants, people who had already lost everything and were trying to rebuild their lives. The earthquake struck a population that was already at the breaking point. According to the UN, 69% of Afghans are subsistence insecure, meaning they lack basic resources for survival. Now, an estimated 500,000 people have been affected by this earthquake, with 260,000 of them being children. Save the Children reports that 280 children have been orphaned by this disaster. These children, already vulnerable in a country where opportunities are scarce, now face an even more uncertain future. The rescue and recovery efforts are facing challenges that seem almost insurmountable. The affected region is mountainous and remote, with infrastructure that was already poor before the earthquake. Roads that were barely passable before are now completely blocked by landslides triggered by both the earthquake and recent flash floods that hit the region just days before the quake. This perfect storm of natural disasters has created a logistical nightmare for emergency responders. There's been lots of landslides and rock falls, and access has been very limited to everybody in the first 24 hours, explained Indrika Ratwada, the United Nations humanitarian coordinator in Afghanistan. The challenging terrain means that heavy rescue equipment can't reach many affected areas, and the risk of additional landslides and rock avalanches has increased significantly with each aftershock. Despite these challenges, Afghan authorities have launched urgent response efforts. Military helicopters have been airlifting critically injured victims to hospitals in Jalalabad and other regional centers. Dozens of commandos have been deployed to areas where aircraft cannot land, tasked with pulling survivors from the rubble and transporting them to locations where they can receive medical care. But the reality is that these efforts are a drop in the ocean compared to the scale of need. The international community faces an impossible dilemma as Afghanistan struggles with this latest catastrophe.
Poor infrastructure in the impoverished country, still fragile from 4 decades of war, has also stymied the emergency response. The World Health Organization has warned that local healthcare services are under immense strain, with shortages of trauma supplies, medicines and staff. The agency has appealed for $4 million to deliver life-saving health interventions and expand mobile health services and supply the distribution of aid. The loss of US foreign aid to the country in January this year has exacerbated the rapid depletion of emergency stockpiles and logistical resources. The country is contending with endemic poverty, severe drought, and the influx of millions of Afghans, which have been forced back to the country by neighbors Pakistan and Iran.
The WHO has issued a $4 million appeal for life-saving interventions, but the broader humanitarian response is complicated by the political reality of Taliban rule. Since the Taliban took control in 2021, humanitarian aid to Afghanistan has shrunk dramatically, dropping from $3.8 billion in 2022 to just $767 million in 2025. The loss of U.S. foreign aid has depleted emergency stockpiles, leaving the country woefully unprepared for disasters of this magnitude. Meanwhile, Afghanistan continues to face multiple crises, including poverty, drought, and the ongoing influx of refugees being expelled from neighboring countries, even as the earthquake zone struggles to cope. This is not the first shock that we've faced this year, explains Tamindri De Silva from World Vision Afghanistan. We're youth undergoing a drought. We're supporting the returnee response. We're still working with the earthquake-affected people in Herat. There's a huge malnutrition crisis in the country, so it's not just the funding shortfalls, it's the compounding of shock after shock in the country, which is stretching already very thin resources. The immediate needs are staggering. Body bags are among the most urgent supplies needed, alongside basic necessities like clothing, hygiene products, and cooking equipment. Medical facilities in the region are overwhelmed, with children being treated without their parents or relatives. A heartbreaking reminder of how many families have been torn apart by this disaster. Healthcare services that were already on the brink of collapse are now pushed beyond their limits. CARE, one of the international organizations responding to the crisis, is working on multiple fronts. Their response includes cash assistance and food security programs, health and nutrition services, winter supplies, crucial as Afghanistan's harsh winter approaches, and protection programs specifically for women and girls. They are also supporting water and sanitation services while providing emergency shelter and trauma care. But the clock is ticking. The earthquake has hit communities already struggling to survive, said a CARE spokesperson. With roads blocked and winter approaching, we're racing against time to reach families who have lost everything. This disaster has also highlighted Afghanistan's extreme vulnerability to earthquakes. The country sits in a broad zone of continental deformation where massive tectonic plates grind against each other. The region experiences constant seismic activity due to the subduction of the Arabian Plate to the west and the oblique subduction of the Indian Plate. This geological reality means that Afghanistan, particularly the Hindu Kush mountain region, is a hotspot for earthquake activity. The pattern is sadly familiar. In June 2022, a massive earthquake in Paktika and coast provinces killed over 1,000 people. The October 2015 Hindu Kush earthquake affected multiple countries across the region. A magnitude 6.3 earthquake in October 2023 killed an estimated 4,000 people, according to Taliban authorities, though the UN put the death toll at around 1,500. Each disaster exposes the same harsh reality. Afghanistan's most at-risk communities bear the brunt of both natural disasters and ongoing man-made crises. The earthquake's impact has been compounded by multiple aftershocks, including a significant 5.2 magnitude tremor that struck on Tuesday, September 3rd, causing additional injuries and further complicating rescue efforts. A more recent 5.6 magnitude aftershock on Thursday has added to the anxiety and potential damage, though the full impact of this latest tremor is still being assessed. Each aftershock sends survivors fleeing in terror, reliving the trauma of that first devastating quake. What makes this disaster particularly tragic is the timing. Afghanistan is already grappling with what many consider the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The Taliban's restrictions on women and girls have complicated international aid efforts, while economic sanctions and the withdrawal of international support have left the country's institutions severely weakened. The earthquake has struck a population that was already among the world's most vulnerable. The human cost of this disaster extends far beyond the immediate casualties. Entire communities have lost their social fabric, their economic base, and their sense of security. Children who have already experienced decades of conflict and instability are now facing yet another trauma that will shape their lives for years to come. The destruction of schools, clinics, and other community infrastructure means that recovery will take years, not months. And this is happening in a country where the healthcare system was already on the brink of collapse, where malnutrition rates were already at crisis levels, and where millions of people were already dependent on humanitarian aid for survival. The images of children receiving treatment in hospitals without their parents nearby serve as a stark reminder of how disasters like this tear apart the basic social bonds that hold communities together. The sight of livestock sheltering in damaged homes highlights how this earthquake has disrupted not just human lives, but entire ways of life that have existed in these mountain communities for generations. These animals represent the livelihoods of families who have lost everything else, their last hope for economic survival in the aftermath of disaster. As rescue efforts continue and the full scale of this disaster becomes clear, several things are certain. First, the death toll will likely continue to rise as rescue workers reach more remote areas and as the full impact of injuries and displacement becomes apparent. Second, the recovery process will be long and difficult, complicated by Afghanistan's existing crises and the onset of winter. Third, this disaster will have lasting impacts on a population that was already among the world's most vulnerable. The earthquake in Afghanistan serves as a reminder of how natural disasters can devastate communities that are already struggling to survive. It highlights the vulnerability of populations living in seismically active regions with poor infrastructure and limited resources. Most importantly, it shows us the human cost when multiple crises converge on communities that have few resources to cope with even a single disaster. As we watch the rescue efforts continue and the recovery process begin, we're witnessing not just the aftermath of a natural disaster, but the latest chapter in Afghanistan's ongoing struggle for stability and survival. The courage of the rescue workers, the resilience of the survivors, and the determination of humanitarian organizations provide some hope amid this tragedy. But the scale of need and the complexity of challenges ahead remind us that this story is far from over. The earthquake may have lasted only minutes, but its impact will be felt for years to come. For the families who lost loved ones, for the children who are now orphans, for the communities that must rebuild from nothing, September 1st, 2025, will be remembered as the day their world changed forever. This is the reality of natural disasters in our interconnected but unequal world, where geography and geology can determine fate, and where the most vulnerable populations often bear the heaviest costs of forces beyond their control.